The first girl he ever spoke to outside a general store had said, "You're sweet, but you've got eyes like winter." He hadn't known what that meant until years later, when the mirror finally confirmed what silence can do to a man. He was 18 when his father died, and no one had come to the burial except the undertaker and the wind. There had been a Bible, sure, and a wooden cross that kept falling sideways from the dry earth, but no eulogies. The town hadn't loved his father, just tolerated him like one tolerates rattlesnakes, carefully, and at a distance. He inherited the ranch with no ceremony, just an old will written in a slanted, shaking hand that said, "To my boy, who never ran, don't sell the land." So he didn't. For 22 years, he lived in that crooked house with the leaky roof and the silver grass that scraped his knees every morning. It had 4 rooms, but he only used 2. The others gathered dust like mourners, without purpose. He had neighbors miles away, but they called him the young ghost, or sometimes the boy who talks to no one. He wasn't unfriendly. He just wasn't seen. No dances, no dinners, no courtships, just seasons that changed outside his window, and animals that didn't ask questions. In spring, he planted. In summer, he mended fences. In fall, he smoked meat and counted firewood. In winter, he simply endured. That was his rhythm, until the day the 10 girls came out of the storm, like a poem someone had tried to burn and failed. The morning had started with fog, so thick it looked like the earth had swallowed itself. He'd gone out to chop kindling, when the wind shifted and carried a sound he hadn't heard in years, boots, many of them, crunching against the frozen ground. He didn't turn at first. Figured maybe coyotes. But then he heard breathing, human, ragged, feminine. He turned. 10 figures, cloaked and limping, approached like shadows with braids and blood-streaked hems. One girl, young, maybe 20, stumbled, and the others caught her before she fell. They didn't speak. Not right away. Just stood near his fence, looking like they'd walked from the grave. He didn't move either. Just held the axe loosely in his hand and waited. The storm behind them howled louder. Finally, one of them stepped forward. She wore a dark green shawl that was soaked to the thread. Her eyes were gray, not frightened, just watching. He said nothing. She said, "We don't want trouble." He nodded once. "You lost." A few heads turned toward her, toward him. No one answered. Then the girl in green looked over her shoulder and said softly, "We were told to keep walking east." Her voice cracked, "But we got no east left." He looked past them, toward the cloud bank of the storm building like a mountain. It would snow within the hour. He opened the gate. Not fully. Just enough. They entered one by one, slow, grateful, silent, like creatures from a different life that had forgotten the sound of doors. He didn't speak again for the rest of that hour. Just led them to the main house, lit the stove, and gave them the leftover stew from the night before. They didn't complain that it was cold. They ate like people not used to eating. One by one, they introduced themselves. Not names, just things like "was in Kansas," or "came from Arkansas, I think," or "they left us near the hills." He didn't press. He offered them towels, old quilts, and a corner of the room with the fireplace. They didn't ask for beds. Most just curled up near the warmth and closed their eyes like they were waiting for the earth to forget them. But he couldn't forget, because they didn't just fill the house, they changed its shape. He walked out to the porch and stood there long after the door closed behind him. Snowflakes landed on his hands, melting as they touched. He couldn't tell if the warmth in his chest was guilt or something older. That night, he sat at the kitchen table, turning his father's ring between his fingers. He still hadn't spoken more than 20 words since they arrived. Still hadn't asked them where they were headed, or what they were running from. But he knew. You don't walk into a stranger's ranch in a blizzard unless the thing behind you is worse than cold. He poured tea, and when he brought it to them, a girl with freckles blinked up at him and whispered, "You don't look like I thought a man would." He wasn't sure what she meant, but he smiled anyway. The first smile in months. She sipped, then asked, "You got a wife?" He shook his head. "Why not?" He paused, then answered honestly, "Guess I never got good at being seen." Her lips quirked, not unkindly. We see you now. Those words sat in his bones like old firewood, not burning yet, but ready. As he walked back to the porch, he saw something strange. One of them, tall, quiet, older than the rest, wasn't inside. She stood under the archway of the barn, face upturned to the snow, unmoving. He stepped toward her. Slowly. "You all right?" he asked, his voice low. She didn't flinch. Just said, "You got ghosts here." He frowned. "No." She nodded. "Then this might be the first night I sleep in peace." She turned to go, and before she disappeared inside, she added, "Thank you." It hit him harder than it should have. He stayed on the porch long into the dark, boots stiff from cold. Inside, muffled laughter floated through the walls. Tentative, like sunlight through old curtains. He didn't join them. He wasn't sure how. But he stayed, and listened. The next morning, the sun broke through the storm clouds like gold dripping from heaven's edge. He stepped outside and blinked hard. 10 dresses hung on the porch railing, drying in the light. 10. Some stitched, some patched, one dyed with berries. Their colors fluttered like flags. Not of surrender, but survival. The house had never known a woman's footsteps before. Now it knew 10. And though the town would whisper, and tongues would wag, he knew he couldn't send them away. Wouldn't. Because the fire inside wasn't just warmth now. It was responsibility. But as he leaned down to check the barn door, he noticed something strange. A boot print. Not one of theirs. Deep. Heavy. Heading toward the trees. Someone had come in the night. And not everyone who sees a porch full of dresses feels mercy. He straightened, the winter wind catching his coat. Whatever they'd been running from might have just caught up. The dresses clung to the railing like size caught in cotton. 10 of them, each a little different, one floral and faded, one stitched in coarse canvas, 2 with prairie lace at the hem, and one dyed a soft beet red. They moved gently in the morning wind like they'd never known the wild, like they'd never seen shame or flight or broken roads. He hadn't planned on counting them, but he did. 10. Still 10. That meant none had left in the night. He made coffee the way his father used to, black as tar and boiled too long, and by the time the smell filled the kitchen, a few of them had stirred. The girl with freckles, Elma, she said her name was, ambled in first. She wore a patched skirt and no shoes, her toes pink from the cold. "Smells like old boots," she said, grinning. He poured her a cup. "It is old boots." She took it with 2 hands like it might break. "We don't usually get morning." "What do you mean?" "Means we don't usually make it to it," she said, and sipped. Behind her, another girl entered, slower, arms wrapped tight, dark braid, sharp eyes. She didn't speak, just watched him. "Her name's Mercy," Elma said. "She don't talk much, but she sees everything." He nodded once to Mercy. She didn't nod back, but she didn't look away either. By mid-morning, they were all awake, some gathered near the fire, some cleaning the dishes, 2 hanging what little they owned across a line between the trees. They moved like a colony, silent, practiced, each filling a role no one had asked them to play. One mended the curtains. One found a broom and started sweeping. Another scraped ash from the hearth without being told. They asked for nothing, but they did things, as if their survival depended on proving their worth. That troubled him more than it comforted him. He went out to the barn, checked the animals, fed the chickens, and passed by the strange boot print again. It hadn't snowed since yesterday. It was still there. He crouched. It was longer than his. Deeper. Heavy. But not fresh. Maybe a day old now. Still, it made him feel watched. He returned inside to find the tall girl who'd stood in the snow the night before sitting at the kitchen table. She had a ledger book open and was scribbling something in its margin. He paused. "That mine?" She looked up, calm. "It was open. I didn't read the letters. Just the numbers. I don't keep much money." She nodded. "I know. You're 3 weeks ahead on hay, though. And you've got 7 chickens too many." He raised an eyebrow. She smiled faintly. "My father ran a bank. Until they burned it." He didn't ask who they were. The answer was always men with torches and hate in their eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "June." "That's a soft name." "It's the last thing my mother ever said." He almost asked what the first thing was, but didn't. Some silences shouldn't be broken. That night, over cornbread and canned peaches, they began to share more. Not names, not all at once, but slivers. One girl said she'd been promised to a merchant in Missouri, but when he saw her limp, he changed the deal. One had been married at 16 and left beaten by 20. Only Elma laughed when she spoke. I got sold twice. First for a horse, second for the saddle. No one else laughed. She didn't either, after a moment. He noticed they all sat in corners, backs to walls. None near the window. You all got somewhere you're headed? He asked. A few looked down. A few looked away. June said, we were told if we kept walking east, there'd be work. A mission. A boarding house. Maybe safety. By who? June paused. A woman named Sister Bramble. That made his gut twist. Sister Bramble was no sister. She ran a labor farm 30 miles east that had burned down 2 winters ago. No one survived. He didn't say that. Instead, he said, you're welcome to stay. If you want. Mercy, quiet in the corner, finally spoke. Her voice was smoke and grit. No man says that without asking what he gets. He looked at her, then said softly, I get the sound of laughter in this house again. Mercy held his gaze for a long time. Then she nodded once and looked away. The next morning, the town found out. He went into town for salt and soap, riding the mule slow through the mud. The general store owner, Mr. Whitlock, raised an eyebrow before he even dismounted. You got company, I hear. He didn't answer. Whitlock pressed on. 10 girls young. That right. They're cold and hungry, the rancher said. That's all. Whitlock whistled low. Town'll talk. Might call for the sheriff. They're not wanted. You sure? He wasn't, but he said yes. As he turned to leave, Whitlock called after him. You keeping them for labor or love? The rancher didn't look back, just climbed onto his saddle and rode home with the wind slicing his face. That night, he told the girls they couldn't go into town for now, that there were people who might not understand. They didn't argue, didn't seem surprised. Elma said, they never do. Later, as he chopped wood under the stars, he heard the soft sound of footsteps behind him. June stood there, shawl drawn tight, eyes full of something heavy. You really don't want anything from us? She asked. He stopped, turned. I want you not to be afraid when the door opens. That made her swallow hard. She stepped closer. It's hard to trust quiet. It always came before pain. I'm not trying to be quiet. I just never learned how to speak. She nodded, eyes glassy. Then maybe we'll teach you. The days turned warmer. Snow melted. The porch dried. One girl, Miriam, found a patch of land that caught sun near the barn and began turning the soil with her hands. It's not much, she said, but I can grow beans here. He helped her, and she told him about a son she lost. 2 years old, buried in a state cemetery with no name. They wouldn't let me stay, she said. Said mothers like me bring bad luck. He didn't say anything, just passed her a spade. Inside, Elma painted. Mercy sharpened knives. One girl began writing letters she'd never send. Each day, the house softened. And then one afternoon, while fixing a saddle under the eaves, he heard June scream. He ran fast, breath short. She stood behind the barn, clutching a torn bonnet in her hand. It was here, she whispered. A man. Watching. Just now. He scanned the trees. Saw nothing. He searched the woods. No footprints this time. Just silence. But that night, he bolted every door. The next morning, Mercy was gone. He found her in the hills, rifle in hand, kneeling by a dead rabbit she hadn't shot. They're coming back, she said. How do you know? She touched the broken twigs beside her. They left this, like a sign. She pointed to a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a dress, pale pink, child-sized. He didn't ask whose it was. He just picked it up, folded it gently, and said, Let's go home. As they walked back, she asked, What if they bring more than fear next time? He looked ahead. Then I'll give them more than silence. That night, he oiled the rifle that hadn't been used in a decade. stared into the fire as the girls sang soft songs from their youth. One voice cracked, one voice wept, but they sang, and he watched the flames, because the ranch was no longer just a place to survive. It was becoming a place someone might fight for. And the boots that had passed in the night? He knew they hadn't walked far. Not far at all. It began with a silence too loud to ignore. That morning, the girls didn't rise with the sun. The usual soft murmurs and footsteps were gone. No kettle whistled. No wood snapped in the fire. The house felt thick with unsaid things, like every beam knew what was coming and wanted no part in speaking it aloud. He found June sitting alone near the wood stove, wrapped in the same shawl she'd worn the day they arrived. Her eyes were open, but not looking, just fixed on something far away. "They remember the date," she said without turning. "Even if they never speak it, they remember the date it all ended." He didn't know what she meant, not yet. But that day, one by one, the girls began to tell their stories. Not in one sitting, not with tears, just fragments, soft as frost falling off branches. Miriam was first. She had a burned scar down her forearm she never tried to hide. That morning, she rolled up her sleeve and ran her finger along the twisted skin. "My husband tried to burn me," she said simply. "Said I was cursed, that my miscarriages were punishment for disobedience." He didn't flinch, just leaned forward and said, "And now?" She smiled, not warmly. "Now I grow beans." In the afternoon, Mercy found him fixing the chicken coop. She stood behind him, arms crossed. "You think kindness makes you safe?" she asked. "No," he said. "Just decent." She nodded. "My first owner said he was decent too. He never raised his voice. Just sold me when the child came out dark." That stopped his hammer in midair. He met her eyes, and she added, "I killed the second man. With a pan. I don't feel sorry." He didn't ask her to. That evening, Elma asked if he had extra paper. When he handed her a tattered journal, she pressed it to her chest like it was gold. "I never learned to write properly," she said, "but I draw real good." She showed him stick figures, little girls with big eyes, running through trees. "This one's me," she said, pointing to a figure with tangled hair, running from a river camp. "They said I was too loud. Sold me for a wagon wheel." He stared at the drawing. "You drew a smile on her." "Yeah," she whispered, "because she made it." By nightfall, only two hadn't spoken, June and the girl they called Quiet Annie. Annie didn't speak at all. Not since she'd arrived. She'd nod, she'd cry, she'd sew. But words never came. Until now. He stepped out onto the porch to find her sitting there, a bundle in her lap. "I kept it," she whispered. He sat beside her. "Knew I wasn't supposed to. But I couldn't bury it. Not with the others." She unwrapped the bundle slowly, reverently. Inside was a small cloth cap. Tiny. A baby's. "They drowned her," Annie said. "The family I work for. Said she wasn't pure. Said I must have seduced their son. I didn't." He. Her voice broke. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. He reached for her hand. She let him hold it. "I'll build a grave for her," he said. "One with a stone. And a name." Annie cried then. Not loudly. Just enough to let the wind carry it. Later that night, June came to his room. Not for warmth. Not for comfort. Just for truth. "They'll come," she said. "You know that, don't you?" He nodded. "I saw the boot prints." "It's not just them," she whispered. "It's the ones who let them. The men with badges. The women who look away. The preachers who say nothing." He looked at her. "And what were you running from?" She didn't blink. "My brother." That surprised him. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the flame of the lamp. "He ran a chapel. Always wore white. Said I owed him my obedience since Mama died." She rubbed her wrist. "He tried to marry me to a banker. I was 15. When I said no, he locked me in the root cellar for 3 days. Said hunger would make me holy." She looked up. "It didn't. It made me leave." She stood then, quietly. "I didn't think we'd find peace here. I just wanted to die somewhere no one would find my bones." He watched her go, heart twisted in ways he couldn't name. The next day, the first threat arrived. A horse without a rider. It limped onto the ranch around noon, saddle torn, blood along the flank. The girls stared. Elma touched its nose. It's branded. The brand wasn't from this county. He didn't recognize the mark. Mercy did. She cursed under her breath. They're close. How close? 2 days, maybe less. Depends on how many they got. He turned to June. What happens if they catch up? She said nothing. He understood. They spent the next 2 days preparing, not for war, but for absence. He helped each girl write a name, or a dream, or a single sentence on a slip of paper. Then they tucked them into jars, and he buried them under the oak behind the barn. If we die, Elma said, at least some part of us will stay. He nodded, but inside, he was already planning something else. The third morning after the horse came, the wind shifted. So did the birds. That meant riders. He saddled his old mule, loaded 2 rifles, slipped a small pistol into his boot. I'm going to town, he told June. Why? To see if the sheriff's soul is still for sale. The ride took an hour. The talk took 3 minutes. Sheriff Danton was polishing a belt buckle when the rancher entered. They're coming, the rancher said. I know, Danton replied. Heard it yesterday. And Danton looked up. And they're men with grievances, women with pasts. It ain't my place to interfere. They'll burn the ranch, then build it again. They'll kill them. Danton shrugged. Maybe, but I'm no crusader. Not for strangers. He leaned forward. And what are they to you, really? Lovers? Property? Charity? The rancher didn't answer. He just stared, then turned and left. On the ride home, he passed the river, stared at it long. At home, the girls were waiting. What did he say? Mercy asked. He dismounted. That the law ain't coming. They didn't flinch. June crossed her arms. Then we fight. No, he said. We survive. He called a meeting that night. Told them the plan. We load 2 wagons with supplies. You ride north, past the canyon trail. I'll stay. You'll die, June said. Maybe, he answered. But not for nothing. They argued, cried, begged, but he held firm. They want you, he said. You leave. I give them nothing. The night before they left, June came to his room again. Not to speak, not to plan, just to sit, to exist beside him. She touched his shoulder. I've never had a place that felt like tomorrow. He didn't speak. She leaned close. Thank you for being the first man who didn't take. He turned to her. Thank you for being the first woman who stayed. They didn't kiss. But when she stood, he said, If I make it, find me again. I will. The girls left at dawn. The ranch felt like a lung that forgot how to breathe. He stayed, waited, and when the riders came, 7 of them, dust-faced and grinning, he met them with silence. Where's the harem? One laughed. He didn't answer. They stepped closer. You protecting them? Still no answer. They dismounted. He cocked a rifle. But just then, far off, past the ridge, a sound. Not hooves. Not birds. Gunfire. They'd followed the girls. They'd split. They weren't here for him. They were chasing ghosts. And June had left him a note in the barn. You taught us stillness. Now we'll teach them to run. He smiled and followed the sound. The fire had already started when he reached the hills. It wasn't a wildfire, at least not yet. It was a torch thrown at the edge of a wagon, crackling as it chewed through dry canvas and broken crates. Smoke rose and long, finger-like spirals, reaching into a sky bruised by dusk. A horse neighed in panic, and somewhere in the trees, a woman screamed. He dismounted, heart pounding. The sound of boots crunching through brush filled the air. Not his. Theirs. There were 6 men. 2 stayed on horseback, circling. The rest were scattered, hunting. They didn't know he was there yet. He moved through the trees like a shadow, keeping low, his rifle pressed tight to his shoulder. Every step measured, every breath earned. Then he saw her, June, crouched behind a boulder, pistol in hand, hair tangled, dress torn. She hadn't run. She had stayed. 3 girls were with her. Elma was bleeding from a cut across her arm, but smiling like it didn't matter. Mercy stood tall, rifle ready, and Quiet Annie was holding a bottle of lamp oil with both hands like it was sacred scripture. They'd made a trap, and he'd walked into the middle of it. A shot rang out. He ducked as bark exploded beside his head. One of the riders had spotted him. Another bullet tore through the branches above. He dove and rolled behind a log. His shoulder slammed into the earth hard, but his grip on the rifle held. He waited. 1 breath. 2. Then he rose and fired. The man on horseback reeled back, slumped, and fell like a sack of wheat. The others shouted. Chaos broke loose. Elma threw the bottle. Fire bloomed across the brush line, like a comet's tail. They weren't running. They were holding ground. For them. For him. The second rider turned and tried to escape, but June stood and fired twice. Missed the first. Hit the second. The man screamed and dropped. The others turned toward her. But he was already moving, running, low and silent, rifle tucked to his chest. He circled wide. Came up behind. One man was yelling orders, pointing at the fire, at the girls, at the smoke. He didn't hear the footfall. He didn't see the shadow. The rancher rose behind him, grabbed his collar, and slammed him into the tree. The man clawed at his throat, but the rancher's arm was steel. You ever sell a girl again? He growled. You'll dig your own grave first. Then he knocked him cold with the butt of the rifle. Another came at him, wild-eyed, knife raised. The rancher dodged and swung, catching him across the jaw. The knife clattered to the dirt. This one stayed down. A third came from behind, grabbed his coat, pulled him back. They wrestled. He twisted, elbowed, broke free. Then Mercy fired, 1 clean shot, and the man dropped. Silence, sudden and absolute. He stood, panting, blood on his knuckles. Smoke thick in the air. Around him, fire flickered low, contained. The last man, young, scared, bleeding from the shoulder, tried to crawl away. Annie walked toward him. He held up his hands. Please. I was just following. She knelt beside him, held the baby's cap to his chest. He sobbed. She didn't shoot him. She just whispered something in his ear. He cried harder. Then she stood and walked away. He would live. And remember. The girls gathered, each bruised but breathing. He counted them. Still 10. Still standing. They began to douse the flames, stomp the sparks, drag the wounded away from the dry grass. He moved to help, but June stopped him. You came, she said. I told you I would. She looked down. Her hand found his. I never thought we'd win. We didn't, he said. We just didn't lose. They walked back to the ranch at dawn, quiet and slow. The sky broke open in soft streaks of rose and silver. Horses limped behind them. So did men in ropes. The town was waiting. News had traveled fast. Too fast. Some watched in silence. Others whispered. But none stopped them. Not this time. 10 girls walked into the town square, behind one man. One girl carried a broken rifle like a banner. Another held a scarred ledger. One had the baby's cap pinned to her collar. They didn't ask for justice. They were the justice. The sheriff met them at the chapel steps, hat in hand. We heard gunfire, he said. We heard silence for years. June replied. That didn't stop you. He glanced at the men tied up. What do you want done with them? The rancher stepped forward. They can face trial, or face the girls. The sheriff didn't argue. Days passed. The trial was short. The sentences longer than anyone expected. And no one, not one person, asked what right the girls had to defend themselves. Because the town had seen. The town had watched 10 dresses dry on a porch and called it scandal. But now they saw it for what it was. A flag. A declaration. A beginning. He rebuilt the barn. June helped. Miriam planted flowers near the oak. Mercy taught him to shoot straighter. Elma painted murals on the inside walls, sunsets and stars, animals and laughter. Quiet Annie began speaking. Only sometimes, but always when it mattered. One by one, the rooms filled. They shared chores, shared stories, shared grief, and slowly, cautiously, joy. People came by now. Dropped off pies. Left hammers, thread, books. The house was no longer the one with no female footsteps. It was the house with 10. The town whispered still, but the tone had changed. Not scandal. Respect. Curiosity. Even envy. They asked questions now. They asked if the rancher would marry one. He just smiled and said, "I already have a family." One evening, June sat with him on the porch, their fingers brushing. "You really never wanted a wife?" she asked. "I wanted peace," he said. "Didn't know it came in pieces." She leaned on his shoulder. The breeze carried the scent of sun-warmed wood and fresh bread. Inside, laughter danced across walls that had once held only silence. He closed his eyes and whispered, "They didn't just bring life back to this place. They brought mine too." A few stars blinked awake. He listened to the sound of 10 voices in harmony, of nails hammering into future walls, of dresses rustling as they moved through the rooms, like wind with purpose. He had been the man who stood between them and fire, but now they stood beside him, together, and in the end, the storm had not broken them. It had revealed them.